I'm going to show you how to create a 5-1 cadence. So we're going to have our treble and our bass clef. We're just going to do this one in C major for now. We're going to write our 5 chord and our 1 chord. So this means the 5th scale degree, this means the 1st scale degree. So if we're in C major, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, this is scale degree 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. So what we're going to do is we're going to build chords on the 1st scale degree. So we just stack in thirds, and we're also going to build on the 5th scale degree. Now when we're writing a chord progression, we're trying to create this 5-1 progression. We want scale degree 5, the chord built on scale degree 5, to come first, and we want it to resolve to the tonic. So that's scale degree 1. So one way you can do this if you get confused with your chord progressions is you can create sort of a cheat staff. So I'm going to write out I'm actually going to put my G major chord first. So we follow the order over there. I'm going to write G, B, and D. And then I'm going to write C, E, and G. So this is my 5 chord. This is my 1 chord. Now we need to double one of these chord tones because we're going to write it for 4 parts. So the best chord tone to double whenever you can is going to be the root of the chord. So now I have all the notes laid out that I'm going to use to create my chord progression. So the first thing I do is I go over here, and we're going to make a little set of rules here. You're going to write in the bass. So my 5 is going to be right here, it's a G. I'm going to have my stems facing down, and my 1 is going to be a C. Anytime you write a bass part, make sure the stems are facing down, even if there's no other part in the staff. So then I go over and I mark off one of my G's and one of my C's. The next thing we want to deal with is a tendency tone. Whenever you have a 5 chord, you have a tendency tone. A tendency tone, there's a few of them. Right now we're just dealing with the leading tone. We're going to abbreviate that LT. The leading tone always has to resolve up by step. So the leading tone is a 7th scale degree. So right here, it's our B. So that means this B here, it has to resolve up to C. If I don't resolve my leading tone, then we don't have a very effective chord progression. There are exceptions for this, but we're not going to talk about those right now. Right now, we're going to do kind of the perfect chord progression where we resolve our leading tone. Now, the thing about voicing, I could have put my leading tone up here in what we call the soprano. I could have put it in the voice below that, which we're going to call alto. I could have put it here, which I did. We're going to call that the tenor. Or I can put it in the bass if the chord progression allows it. Since these are moving from 5 to 1, I cannot have a leading tone in the bass. That would have to be a 5-6 chord in order to have the 3rd in the bass. So we'll talk more about that later as well. For now, I'm just going to put my leading tone in the tenor. So the next thing you do is you want to keep any common tones if you can. And if you don't have any common tones, you just want to move the remaining voices by a step. So I'm going to write common tones or move by a step. So I see here that I have a common tone between the root of the 5 chord and the 5th of the 1 chord. So I'm going to go ahead and put that in the same voice. Again, doesn't matter where I put it. I'm just going to label that as a common tone for now. And then I just fill in my remaining voices. So D goes to E. And that's all there is to it. We have a complete chord progression now. And if I go over to the piano and play it, it sounds something like this. It's a nice 5-1 progression. So I'm going to keep working on these. We're going to slowly introduce all these different chord progressions. I'm going to give you short little tips on how you can reduce the process. There's a lot of rules that just following these 3 rules tends to avoid. The first one is we don't want parallel octaves. Parallel octaves would be when 2 voices are moving in the same exact direction by octave. So So right here, G and G, going to A and A, those are what we call parallel octaves. You also want to avoid parallel fifths. So if I make a treble clef here, this is a perfect fifth. If I move like this between any of the voices, these are parallel fifths. We have to avoid those. The other thing we want to try and do is avoid skipping into an octave by another interval. So something like this. If I have a fifth going into an octave, we call that direct or hidden motion into an octave. So we want to avoid that. One way to correct it, let's say you have something like this, as long as the soprano voice is moving by step, this is still direct motion into an octave, but as long as they're moving by step, that's perfectly fine in a 4-voice counterpoint or harmony. In 2 parts, that is not okay. You can't do that in 2 parts. So we're going to talk about all these different rules, but the way I like to start is simplifying things. You got a 5-1 cadence, follow these rules. Write in the bass line, write in the tendency tones, use the common tone, or move by step. If you do that, you won't make any mistakes and your chord progression will work.